everything we've been talking about today is really building up their self-esteem, caring about them as these little humans, because that's what they are. They're not numbers to us. And making them feel like they can tackle everything. There's a reason why all these kids love these superhero movies. It's because they want to feel that empowerment, that adventure.
Welcome everybody to Unleash Your Greatness. I'm Adam Platt, and I have got a special guest on today. Her name is Rosalba Serrano-Mcfadden, and hopefully I got that right. But
you got it.
Those who watch the show know I'm horrible with names, so hopefully I got it okay. But so Rosalba is a elementary math consultant, and she's based in New York. She is the founder of Zen Math, where she provides online training and coaching for elementary math teachers. And she has a mission to help students, teachers, and parents see the potential, their full potential, and unlock the mathematician inside of themselves. And I'm excited to have you on today, Rosalba. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
So, I really appreciate, one, you coming on the show, and two, your mission with helping kind of change the
landscape.
Yeah, good. That was the word I was looking for. The landscape of how we do education in our school, our public school systems, and probably all school systems. But you're on a mission to help improve that, to kind of help change that landscape so that we can more efficiently teach our students, our kids, how to be more productive and more successful in life, because the world is changing. And sadly enough, education has not really changed much in the last 200 years.
Not really. At all. We just have more tests.
Right, we have more tests. We have more homework, I think.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I, we have 5 daughters, and we get honestly kind of fed up with some of the homework and how much homework we have. And some of it is meaningful, and we can see why it's there. But some of it is just tedious, and it seems like it's more of a battle as parents, doing it with the kids. And I'm sure teachers, unfortunately, their hands are tied, right? In so many ways, because they're dictated on what they got to teach, how to teach it. If they don't do it, they lose their job. And
that's what I think I'm working towards, is to kind of be the little math rebel, the little person in their ear saying, no, we can change it. It can happen. Because Adam, you're right. I mean, it's been the same for years. And you had mentioned we really want our kids to be successful, right? And I think what successful meant decades ago is very different than what successful means now. Right now, we want a society of critical thinkers and problem solvers. And back then, we really the point of our success was to be in an office from 9 to 5 and to compute and to do data analysis. And it was very different, the landscape back then, than it is to now. So education kind of has to shift in that direction too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, back in the day, you wanted these kind of rounded individuals, which is good. You want kids to experience a little bit of everything so they can find what they love doing and what they want to go into, a profession or some kind of a, if they want to go into higher education, what they want to learn about. But I think, back in the day, we wanted to, you had to teach all these, basic things so they got a feel for everything. And now it's like you say, we need the critical thinkers. We need the people who can think outside the box, and technology and just the whole evolvement or evolution, I guess, of the world is it's changed the landscape of how business is done, how, I mean, pretty much everything really. Like you say, we don't just need people to go in and crunch numbers or type stuff on a keyboard all day, right?
Yeah. And I always try to encourage teachers, because I think that there's like a learned helplessness there, right? With teachers, we have mandates that we have to stick to. But I also think that we can make change and build reform around some of these things. I always encourage the teachers I work with, you have to allow students to color outside the lines. They have to be able to do that in order to create their own masterpieces. You know, when you and I went to school back in the day, there was no such thing as a social media manager. That was not a thing when we went to school, but that is a career that exists now. So we generally have to prepare kids for situations that we don't know, positions and jobs that we don't know will exist in the future. Like, we can't predict what is going to be the next phase of what technology looks like or our society looks like. But what we can do is really, support them in being problem solvers. So then that way, when a position like social media manager comes up, they've tinkered enough to figure it out and go down that career path if that's what they choose to. But it's about providing them those opportunities to, draw outside the lines. And I don't think we allow kids to do that. And I think schools don't allow teachers to do that either, right? Because we have to follow pretty much a rule book and stick to it. So we're often caught doing the same thing that we're doing to our students, which, is unfortunate.
You're so right. And I've got all kinds of questions swarming around in my head right now, just because of that little bit that you just said. I love the fact that you said that, back in our day when we were students, there was no social media managers. And I actually had that very discussion just yesterday I was on another person's show. He does a live show on YouTube, and he brought that up. He's like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a wrestler and a comedian. That was his thing. Right. And he does do that, but then he's also a podcaster as well. And he has a show on YouTube, and he's like, when I was a kid, that didn't even exist. Like, I didn't even know I could do that until now, when now all this technology and everything has opened all that up. And I think it's that way with anything, podcasting, YouTubing, there's, kids that play video games and make millions of dollars because they just stream them playing video. I mean, there's so
yeah. Well, my son is striving for that one. That's what he's working towards currently.
I think almost every boy in America is probably striving for that one. They want to be ninja, right?
That's it.
But things like that just didn't exist. And things like DoorDash and, technology has allowed so many companies, and it is those visionaries who see those things, who are willing to color outside the box to say, hey, you know what? I see this gap, and I see this technology has caught up to this gap, that now I can create this company, this business, this lifestyle around it. So things like DoorDashing and Airbnb, and I mean, Lyft is the biggest taxi service in the world, or Uber, the biggest taxi service in the world, and they don't own a single car. Like, they don't, like, yes, how ingenious is that, right? Like, it's a totally different take.
And it all stems from just being innovative, right? I mean, if you think about these, like you called them problems, it's not that it was so, it wasn't, think about Uber. I mean, Uber is a perfect example of that. That's not like a critical earthly problem that we need to tackle, but that was a problem, right? I mean, it was an issue, and someone found a way to address it and made a lot of bank from it, make some good money from it, just because they found a small problem that existed in the world, and we really want our kids to see those small ones and even the larger ones, and kind of strive for that, for tackling some of the larger issues as well.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think, like you say, we try to box kids in to, like, this is how things is. This is how the world is. This is what you got to learn. This is what this is how you have to do it. And like you say, like, we create this culture or this atmosphere of you can't think outside of that box. You can't look at, like, what are other solutions that we could come up with. And I love stories of, these companies like Airbnb. My wife was telling me about Airbnb the other day, about how these guys started it. Like they literally were going like to a conference or something like that. Or no, there was a big conference that comes to their town. It was like these 3 or 4 guys that all had this house together or something, and they couldn't afford their rent. And so they're like, oh, there's this big conference coming together. Why don't we just offer to, and all the places were booked. So we're like, we'll just offer to have people pay us to come and stay at our place, and we'll go leave for the weekend or whatever.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was the backstory for that. That's so interesting.
And so like every year they would do that. And then they just like, we can create like a company around this. And now they're the biggest real estate owner of, what is that? Rentals, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they don't own a single state of real estate. Like there's nothing they own. Amazing. Right. And amazing. It's just like thinking outside of that box is so critical. And math is one of those things, I think, that takes that innovation, right? Like math it doesn't change a lot, like the principles, but looking at things differently and seeing it differently and just the overall teaching of our children, I think, is so critical. Because and I'm sure you hear this all the time, but the way that elementary math is done now is not the way I did elementary math. Like my kids bring my math homework to me and they're like, I need help doing this. And I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. And they're like, that's not how my teacher told me how to do it. I'm like, well, that's how you do it. And they try to explain.
I hear this multiple times a day. No, yes, I do. It is the profession. So, because if teachers even say it as well, right? Because we didn't learn it. We have to teach it, but we didn't learn it that way either. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why math, always has this really bad rep, because we're taking it as how we learned it, how we understood it. And math has been proven to be very difficult for some people, but I think it's because we concentrate on the wrong aspects of it. If you think about what math really truly is, it's really all about problem solving. It's not about step 1, do this, step 2, do this. It's not about memorize this formula, memorize this. I mean, that's how we went to school. We went to school where it's like you memorize this formula and this calculation and get it right on the test. And then you kind of like forget it later, right? Like, it's like, you really don't use it again. But what we're trying to do differently now is really get kids to, again, think deeper about the context. So it matters. So it's not just step 1, step 2, step 3, but like, okay, what's going on in this situation? And what can we do to figure this out and solve it? Because those are the societal questions we'll be asking, right? All right, there's this, climate issue or whatever. I don't know, make something up. How are we going to figure it out? How are we going to solve it? The same societal questions that we ask are really the questions we want to be asking in our math classroom. But unfortunately, because math has gotten such a bad rap for so many years, it's hard to kind of like unlearn our habits when it comes to it. And it's very difficult. I always say this everywhere I'm on, any podcast interview. My job is very difficult because I have to convince people to love math and I make it happen. It works. I make it happen, but it's a road. It's definitely a journey we have to go on. And I think something clicks for people when you start telling them, hey, it's not about, A, B, and, doing it like this, A, B, and C. It's like, no, go about it in a way that you feel is best. And let's figure out if it works or doesn't work. And that's what the classroom should look like, where we're given like all these opportunities for kids to figure out stuff and not, copy me, do as I say, kind of like that. Again, it's letting them kind of be creative and think outside the box themselves. But we never think about that when it comes to math, because we feel math is in this box and this is how we solve things and we can't leave it. So that's what I'm trying to kind of break free from.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think, so for me, math was always the topic or subject that I actually kind of got. Like, to me, that made sense. I when I was young, I had a learning disability. And so reading and writing and spelling were really hard for me, but math just made sense. Like numbers made sense to me. And so I guess, I've always had kind of a special place in my heart for math. I think it's fun. Like story problems are a little bit difficult because I just didn't read well. But for math itself, like algebra, like equations and stuff was just fun. And it made sense to me. Where I really didn't like math, and I'll be totally honest here, is geometry.
Mm,
I just did not like geometry because I got into geometry and all of a sudden it was like, you got to learn these proofs and you got to, do all this proofs, uh, proves this and this and this. And it's like, I just didn't, like, it didn't make sense. And I hated geometry. But later in life, when I actually got into construction, I started doing tile, and I had to use geometry because the room and then I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. I learned the golden triangle and different things like that really did make sense. I'm like, okay, geometry is cool. Like you can use, and we use math all the time. That's a thing, right? Like,
yeah.
people just realize like what the like higher level math you probably won't use every day. You're not going to use calculus unless you're an engineer or something like that. But really, we use math all the time, and it really is important. So
Yeah, and I think that's something that needs to be brought to light kind of more often, is that, it's the norm is for people to say, oh, I'm just not a math person. I'm just not a math person. That is a very general response that we get from the public, right? But then they in the same breath will be like, well, I'm a musician and I'm an artist. Okay, wait, hold on a second. Those do require math.
yeah.
So I don't think we realize that how much we apply math in our everyday life. And that's our goal, and kind of sharing that with our children, is for them to see it early on. So they see that math is really, I'm not saying this because I'm a geek about it, but it really is beautiful. It's in nature, it's in music, it's in stories. I mean, Shakespeare's sonnets literally are written with a mathematical format, which is amazing. So people that value literature, I mean, there's math in there. I always say, like, there's math and, like, especially like raps, right? Like rappers, right? They're in the beats and their counts. So it's surrounding us, but we don't see it. And I'm hoping that, if we kind of just shift our mindset around that and we see it and how it can apply to our everyday lives, then people will build more of like a respect and a passion for it, right? Because once they see how it actually affects them. And I think we lost that when you're in a math classroom sitting in rows and kind of just doing all the odd problems in the textbook, right? And then not peeking in the back to get the answers, like, that's boring. That's not fun. But if you connect math and art, right? If you take a piece of art and say, okay, let's find all the symmetry here, and let's find the angles or the rays and things like that, like, then it becomes something that students could possibly connect to, if they're artists. It depends on, what they like. But I can tell you, no matter what background you have, or what things you're interested in, I guarantee you there's not a person out there that says, I really loved math class when we sat in those rows and, like, did all the, like, 20 something problems in the textbook. Oh, I love getting all that for homework and, like, struggling through that for hours. There's not one person that would ever say that. But what we could do is find the people that had those positive experiences, like you're sharing with the construction. I mean, that is something that you found math in and you saw, hey, I can relate it to something. Right. That's what we want. We want it to be relatable.
Yeah. I mean, when I do tile, and I still do a little bit of tile for friends or whatever, if they need some help. And I actually really do enjoy it every once in a while. Thankfully, I don't do it as a living anymore. I was much younger when I did it back then, and my body was a little bit, stronger. But when I do it now, it is fun because there is so many angles and math when I do that. How do I get the tile in this corner, and how do I cut it? And I use 45s and 22.5-degree angles, and I have a speed square that. I mean, it actually is.
I mean, it's basically like a big puzzle, really.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's just like a hands-on puzzle that you have.
Right.
I mean, I probably wouldn't advertise it like that to people that want tiling done. Like, I'm going to just sort this puzzle out some type of way in your bathroom. But
right. Yeah, but and you're right, though. Math is everywhere, and you can see it. You can see it in art. You can see it in music. You can see it in poems. I mean, the rhythms, the sonas, the music, the beats, all of it, it's all math. It's all mathematical, and it's definitely everywhere. And you're right. There's very few. So I will admit, I probably do know a few people that probably did say I loved sitting in math class. Like,
Really?
yeah, I mean, I worked in
Oh,
there.
I have to meet them. I have to. That's like such a rare
They're all
breed.
engineers. They're like super geek engineers, but I would imagine some of those guys that I worked in the aerospace industry for years and knew tons of engineers, and I would say that there's a number of them that are like, numbers are just like that's their life. Like that's all, especially software. Like that's all software is
Yeah.
a bunch of numbers, right? So, um, anyways, but you're right. There's probably very few people. I know I didn't have like, even though I got math, like it was not like my favorite thing to sit there and listen to the teacher try to show us how to do equations and stuff like that, right? So and I totally see the importance of math, and I don't. I guess I want to shift the conversation just a little bit and focus on like education as a whole, right? And that's really what your purpose is trying to get, although your focus is math, you're trying to change the focus on how we educate our kids and how we get them excited about what their future holds and how to be more successful. And I think there's this and I'd love to pick your brain on this because like I say, I dealt with a learning disability when I was young, and my oldest daughter also had a learning disability. She had to go into what we call resource in here in Utah. It's like I think other people call it special ed or whatever. But she had to have help for a little while in elementary school because she just wasn't catching on as fast as the teachers wanted her to with reading and things like that. And I had the same problem. And I eventually got to a point in my life where it just started clicking. It just made sense. Like things just started coming. But I think so oftentimes we look at kids that are maybe a little behind or a little bit slower, and we're like, they're going to fail at life because they're not getting it. And it's because their test scores don't reflect what the school standard says they should be at and things like that. And it's kind of frustrating from a parent standpoint. We have twins. We have, like I say, 5 daughters, and our youngest are twins. And one of my twins, they're 7. She got sent home with paperwork, and they're like, we want to do all these tests on your daughter because we feel like she has some maybe learning disabilities. And we're like, okay, she might have a little bit of slower time like I did when I was young, but the things they want to test her, like we want to test her hearing, we want to test her communication skills, we want to test her, and we're like, she doesn't have any problems in those areas. She just is bored. Like she really is just bored. If she doesn't find what you're talking about interesting, she zones out. She does that to me and my wife all the time. But I guess like I just want to kind of pick your brain on like what can parents do in that situation when they're being told like your student is behind, your student is not where all the other kids should be, and they've got ADD or they ADHD or whatever, and we need to have them tested, or I don't know. Like it's kind of frustrating from a parent standpoint.
I have actually a couple of thoughts on this from a couple different sides that I'd love to share. I'm glad that you brought this up. So let me backtrack a little bit. I want to start off with the way I went to school. And I think I shared this with you previously. But so I grew up in foster care and group homes personally. I didn't have a very good home environment. So I was moved into that setting. So, I mean, imagine I'm already a Latina, right? I'm in not a good home setting. I'm bounced around from foster care to group homes, right? So school was hard for me.
Absolutely.
School was very hard. And what ended up making it harder is that the adults that surrounded me, like you mentioned earlier, really had a negative deficit mindset about me. Oh, she's never going to catch up. oh, she can't possibly do that. She doesn't have good home structure.
Mm.
She can't blah, blah, blah. So I've heard that as a child, I've heard that for many, many, many years. Now, here's the issue when that happens. And I'm not shifting blame to teachers, but I think this is language that us as adults in general have to be mindful of.
Yeah.
What we say to kids can make or break them, period. It can. You can, just like you can change someone's day just with one word, like one kindness, you can change a kid's life by the way you treat them, right? And we can be the nicest people in the world, but when we're using that deficit language, like the kid can't and they need help and they're always struggling, kids absorb that and they make that as their identity. They decide at 9 years old, oh my goodness, these adults are saying this about me. This has to be the way that I am then. And then it takes us so many years to work on ourselves to undo that as adults. So I'm very particular and very careful on how we talk to students and talk about students because of the impact that it has. And obviously, I mean, they were wrong because I came out of that knowing math really good, really well, right? And now I share all of that with the world. So clearly my teachers were not correct, but it took me to have faith in myself to get to that point.
Yeah.
Because technically being a kid in foster care, the statistic of me, so I think it's 2.3% of kids in foster care actually graduate college with a master's degree or a graduate degree. I can't remember which one.
I mean, statistically, you should probably either be dead in jail or living on the streets, right?
That's exactly it. Those were my options. You named it. Did you pull up those stats, Adam?
No, but that is a common thread.
It is
with foster kids and just, lower income single family or single parent homes, like, and obviously single parent homes where at least there's a parent, they're probably a little bit more successful. But if you're like low income, single parent, living in, subsidized housing, your chances are so much less. Your ability to succeed is so much less, right?
absolutely
And foster care on top of that is even worse. Like
exactly, because it's not your housing. It's not and especially if you're bouncing around, right? Because you don't know where you're going to be or where you're going to end up. So it's so important for the people. You're absolutely right. Those were the three options that I had. I mean, the statistics should be showing me the other way, but yeah. I really pushed myself to, I literally grew up saying, I don't want to become this statistic. I know what it should look like. I don't want that for me. And then once I started having children, then I was really like, oh, this definitely can't be me because I have to show them something different. Yeah. So I share that story only because of what I know. That's my personal, interaction that I had with school and my personal experience. But I do think that this applies. If you look at the current status of education, I think this applies overall to kids even nowadays. If you talk about kids in that deficit mindset, that they can't do it, they're always struggling and not embracing their strengths. My strength was that I can speak multiple language. A teacher should have been embracing me for that because they may have only have one and I came in with 3. So that's an asset, right? That's something to be proud of. That's something that's needed now in the workforce, right? To speak multiple languages and things like that. So yes. I do think that we're still struggling with that piece in education where we're constantly going about, and grades do that and test scores does it to us. We're constantly focusing on the kids not being able to do something. And what we're doing there is we're dimming their light. They come into school so excited, like, oh my goodness. I don't think there's like little kids that actually hate going to school. At first, they're excited to get a backpack, right? And like, oh, yeah. Who's my teacher? I'm going to have a classroom of friends. They're so excited. And then take a look at high school seniors. Their whole light has dimmed. They're not having fun in school. They like to socialize, but we lose the love of it along the way. And I think it's because we're dimming their light. We're constantly telling students, they can't do something or they're struggling with something. And then we relay that information to parents. Like you're saying right now, how, the school that your children are in are saying that, they need testing. And you're right, maybe there is some support needed. That's fine. But I think when we have conversations with parents as educators, we also need to provide strengths as well. What is your daughter doing right now that's really awesome? You should be hearing about that too. And your daughter should be hearing about that, right? Because that's what gets you to build confidence. And, I always say this, as adults, we buy so many self-help books, right? We listen to a bunch of podcasts. We do so many things as adults to learn how to have confidence.
Yeah.
We had that early on as kids. When we were really young, we would wear outfits that didn't match. We would just run, we were, as kids, you exude confidence. And then society gets in the way, and then we slowly start comparing ourselves to one another, competing with one another, and then our confidence kind of falls back and diminishes. But if we just hold on to that, and if we keep kids in that setting of you're awesome and you can do this, and this may be kind of hard, but you'll get through that too. I think that would really shift education if we actually started treating these kids as they deserve it, I guess, and not as, they're just a score for me. And, this is just a grade that they represent. I hate grades. I'll tell you that right now. I know a lot of educators don't like that I say that, but what happens when you get a grade? You identify as that. Oh, I'm a C student. What does that even mean, being a C student? In one class, you could be a C. You can hand in that same work in a different class, and that teacher may grade it as a B. But you've already determined, what type of person you are based on a grade.
Yes.
So I struggle with that piece when we start affecting children's identity based on the conversations we have around them or about them. Sorry, I went on a rant.
No.
I'm very passionate about this, if you can't tell.
No, I'm so glad you brought so many of those things up, and that really is what I wanted to kind of pick your brain about, because you're exactly right. Grades, they don't tell the whole story. Definitely not. Sure, there's some, I guess, lead indicators there of how a student may be, but they don't tell at all the full picture. I know kids who are brilliant when it comes to academics, but their social skills are awful. Sure, they can ace a math quiz, or they can write an awesome paper, but they can't look an adult in the eye and hold a conversation for more than 30 seconds, right?
Exactly.
And then I know kids who are awful, like my daughter, like my twin, who maybe she doesn't come across as she does struggle with reading, and we know that. And I feel like she kind of probably is cursed with my ability a little bit. And I think things will start to click as she gets older. But she's super creative. She's super smart. She sits down and she can create things and make things. And, she's just creative. And there's so many people in history that if we judge them on their academics or their accolades, we would have, and they believed what people said about them, that they were stupid, they were dumb, they would never succeed. There would be so many things we wouldn't have in this world. I mean, absolutely. I love the story of Thomas Edison, who his mother got a letter from the teacher or the principal or whatever saying, your son is too dumb. He can't be coming to school anymore. We refuse to teach him. And Thomas Edison looked at his mom and said, what does the note say, Mom? And she's like, you're too smart and too special to be at that school, so I'm going to teach you now. Yeah. He just totally changed it. And from that point on, he's like, I'm smart, I'm brilliant. And he went on to become one of the most brilliant minds in in the 19th century, creating all kinds of amazing things.
Same with Einstein too. He was socially awkward and he had terrible grades, honestly.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there a day that goes by that he's not mentioned at some point in our world? I mean, it's massive, the influence. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Even, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think I love the fact that you brought up that grades they don't identify with what that person can accomplish in life. Because I'm sure when you were young and you were in foster care, you probably didn't have great grades.
Oh, I had terrible grades.
And look
Terrible
at you
grades.
now, like you're successful, you're out there, you're creating this movement and spreading your message that math is important and that there's a better way to teach it, and it's so needed. So
And
yeah.
can I just add something to that? It's interesting because in college I worked really hard to get perfect grades. So I was so close to a 4.0, and I really thought that proved my success. Like, oh, I made it. Foster care didn't tear me down. I'm successful. I got all of these perfect grades. And then I went into teaching and realized, wait a second, when I went to college, I was just mimicking whatever the professors were telling me to do. I wasn't being creative. I wasn't being innovative. I was just following rules very well. And then I got those grades. It wasn't until I got to teaching where I was like, whoa, I don't want to be this person in my classroom. I want the kids to shine. What I want to do is use my platform to bring up their excellence. So even though I had all those amazing grades in college, I really left school and I was like, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm going to do it this totally different way. So
That's awesome. And I don't think there's anything wrong with setting goals and striving to be as good as you can be, right? Like I did the same thing when I was getting my undergrad. As I'm like, I'm going to work my butt off and do the best I can, because I mean, my kids look at my grades from like junior high and high school, and they're like, because I'm always at them. Like, I have one daughter who she's super smart, but she just doesn't like to do the work, and so she doesn't have great grades usually at midterm, and we're like, you got to get your grades up, because she'll have like F's and D's and stuff, and then like the last week of school she pulls them all up and she gets like D's, and like, see if you just did that all term long. But anyways, she'll look at my mom saved some of my old report cards and stuff. She's like, Dad, you had D's and C's and stuff, and here you are all after me saying I have to get grades. I'm like, yeah, but you can do it. I know you can do it. But the thing is I had horrible grades when I was in high school. And so when I got into college, I'm like, I'm kind of like you, like, I'm going to work my butt off and get good grades. And I did. I didn't have a 4.0, but I ended up graduating like a 3.93 or something like that. So pretty great for a kid who probably most people looked at in elementary and junior high and whatever grade school and thought that I would never go on to getting probably even a high school diploma. But yeah, it's like this, it's okay to push yourself, but at the expense of what, I guess, is the question. If you're doing it just to, and it, again, I guess I'm kind of torn because I can see both sides, right? Like grades don't matter, but at the same point, like you can strive to be good at that if that's your desire, right?
And I agree with you, but I think that I totally agree. I'm not saying throw grades out the window. I think they're ridiculous, but I think that where we're really losing sight of is what you're saying, like that strive for. We don't give kids something to strive for because everything is bloody boring. School is boring. I mean, honestly, if you ask your daughter, the one that's pulling those grades up, I'm sure she's able to do it, but she's probably bored to death, So I think that if we made it something that's excitable for them, right? And something engaging, that's why I always talk to teachers, like, what is going on with them currently? What are your kids into? You can make problems around that. My son is, he kind of has no choice, but he's pretty good at math. My youngest one, kind of makes sense to math teachers.
Yep.
But I'm going to say it, he is absolutely bored in school. He hates it. And he does his own ways he's not copying what we do. I mean, the way he subtracts, I'm not going to get into it, but it's a whole other thing that I don't even know what he's doing, but it's correct. I just don't know what's going on there. But I just find ways, we tie the math in at home because we just talk about the stuff that he's doing. Like you were mentioning before, they're so into video games. So my son is like on Fortnite all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're seeing that a lot, but geez. So we just make problems about, how many, I think they're called like skins you can get in the game. And don't ask me how to play the game. I don't really
I don't
understand
know
it,
how
but
to either, but
but but I'll talk to him about it, and then we just kind of make up situations with that. He loves Minecraft too. Minecraft is great for math.
yeah.
So imagine if we brought in those pieces into schools, then kids do have something they want to strive for. I always relate it to puzzles. People, if you put a puzzle in front of a person, there's two reactions you get. Oh, I hate puzzles. Those are too hard. I can't figure it out. And then, they'll like go over the table and be like, they'll play around a little bit and a little bit. And then you get that internal passion or whatever it is. You get this internal bug that's like, I want to finish it. I want to finish whatever this is. It could be a Sudoku in a paper, it could be a genuine, just plain puzzle. That's the feeling we want to give kids in math, or in school in general, right? It's just enticing them with something, but so that they then get the urge to be like, yeah, I want to see this through. I want to write it out. Like, I want to see what's at the end of this. And because of the way the education system is set up, we don't provide those opportunities. Some schools do. Some schools are project-based and all about STEAM.
Yeah.
But for the most part, our public education system isn't set up in that way to entice the kids,
Yeah. And I see that. And I love that you brought up that we got to keep kids excited about things, create that momentum, like you said, the steam, if you will, and keep them just going. And going back to your puzzle analogy, where I heard a statistic a little while ago saying that I think 40% of the puzzle is done in like the last hour or something like it, because people start doing it and they have to build the outside and then they're trying to piece together all the stuff. But when it gets to that last little bit, everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is so close. And they start all pitching in and putting their last pieces in. And it's because you got that momentum and you can see the picture more clearly.
Yes.
And things. And I think if we can kind of take that analogy, I guess, and relate it to education, create that steam, that momentum behind it, and keep them, sailing forward into, their senior year, where they're just not glazed over in class anymore.
Exactly.
They are excited, and there'll always be those students that they're just excited about learning or whatever. And kudos to them. None of my kids have been quite that way. Well, my oldest daughter was a little bit that way, but
and I feel like my kids love learning. They just don't like doing it in school. Right. Like we played, we're big nerds here. So we play Dungeons and Dragons every Sunday over here as like our family, Sunday bonding time. And the kids just get so creative. They bring in like historical aspects into the game. There's obviously some math in it with the dice rolling. I feel like I always joke about this. I was like, as a teacher, we're covering like every subject here, guys. We're just missing some science. But it's kids do love to learn. It's just we have to make sure that we're nurturing them and providing them a setting where they want to do it in that brick and mortar, right? In that building that they walk into or now it's virtual, but you know what I mean? We want to make sure that they have that same feeling in there, and not that they're walking into these buildings dreading their day and that they only get to do something exciting when they walk out. That is where that shift needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I agree 100%. And I want to kind of bring up another point about education is as a culture or a society, we have kind of placed this like natural progression on education, right? And there's such a thing as being educated without having to go through the same process as education that we all think of when it comes to at least Western education, right? In the US and Canada and so forth. Because up until just 200 years ago or so, if you wanted to learn how to do something, you went and found the person who did it and you learned from them. Mm-hmm. That really has that's how you were an intern, you were a mentor, you were or you found a mentor. If you wanted to be a blacksmith, you went and learned from the blacksmith, right? You were his apprentice. And I think so oftentimes now that we feel like we have to graduate from high school, we have to go to college, and then we get a job, and there's just this progression that we have to go through. And if we don't go on that exact path, that there's something wrong with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the case. I don't think we have to go. Higher education is not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very successful people who have not either gone to college at all or they dropped out. Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs never graduated from college. Mark Zuckerberg was in Harvard when he decided to drop out and do Facebook. And, he's one of the richest people in the world now, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stories of people who are very successful. And those people usually are, like we were talking about before, are the think outside the box people, right? They're very creative. They came up with things that they could see a gap in, what people wanted or needed, and they figured out a way to fill that gap, and they've become very successful at doing that. I guess my point is education doesn't need to be just a school thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I know the typical thing, the thing I should say is that, nope, this is the path. I'm an educator and this is the path I want them to follow. And that's why I always say I'm like your unconventional math consultant, because I go the other way. I totally agree with you. And I think what ends up happening is that, like you mentioned, people will drop out, right? But also that we spend so much money getting these degrees and then end up doing something completely different. I think I read the stats on this a little while back, but in a person's life, they change careers around 3 times. That's like the average.
Yep.
I mean, one thing just to start off, I think it's absolutely ridiculous at 18 for kids to decide at that moment what they want to do for their forever. That is a rough, follow an 18-year-old around. They don't even know what they want to eat at lunchtime and hang out with different, you cannot have them pick their future at that point. Exactly. Should we have general classes where kids can kind of figure it out along the way? Sure, right? We also have to keep that same mentality if students are going into college, the same mindset that I'm talking about now with elementary kids. It's like, keep it enticing and engaging and where they want to strive for something. The reason why Zuckerberg and they didn't fit in the box. They came out of the education system because it was confining them.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get to their excellence. They couldn't get to their, brilliance by being kind of stuffed into that box, right? So they left it. And it's not to say that I'm not encouraging people to not try it. I just think that it doesn't have to be the societal norm that in general, it's a social construct we're creating. We're saying the right steps is high school, then college, then 9-to-5 job. I don't necessarily agree with the 9-to-5 thing either. Yeah. I hate to say it because there's a whole slew of issues there. We don't need those steps in order to be successful. It's like you mentioned, it's about finding a trade, finding something that you're passionate about and pursuing that. Now, do I believe that you have to put in time and invest time to be your best self in whatever that is? Sure, because I think that's the only way you get better and where you will yourself feel more fulfilled. But I really think we push kids down this college path, and I don't necessarily know if we're creating a society that feels fulfilled,
right,
or if we're boxing them in. Are we boxing them? Is that why there's so many career changes in adults? Because they felt like they've had to pick something and it was not the right thing for them.
Yeah.
So I have 2 older boys that are currently in college, and growing up, I had the mindset, again, after coming out of a foster home and everything, oh, you guys have to follow this path, get good grades, you need a scholarship, blah, blah, blah. And now they're in college, and it's funny because they're like, whoa, Mom, you're totally different. I'm like, yeah, just do whatever you guys want to do. Like, try that class. It can't hurt to try, do this. My son took a year off and he didn't know if he was going to go back. And I was like, listen, whatever you end up doing, just put your all into that. If it's not school, it's not school. He wants to go in for diplomacy. So he really just wants to learn a bunch of languages, honestly, and use that somehow. And that's cool. The other one wants to be an artist, go that route. I'm okay with it. But I think we need to nurture that in our kids, because we give the wrong message if we're saying only follow these steps. It's just going to, I think, hurt them in the long run.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I love the fact that you have kind of shifted your mindset from where you were when your kids were younger to where they are now. And like, yeah, if that's your passion, then go for it. And, you know, I do agree that there is certain professions you need to go to school for. Like if you want to be a doctor, guess what? You need to go to school.
I would hope so. Yes.
You want to be a lawyer, you need to learn about law. There's definitely certain things, but there's so many degrees out there that, like you say, like you get a degree and then they don't ever use it. Like I work with people in the aerospace industry. I remember one lady, her degree was in culinary arts, and here she was a director over a division. And it's like, how do you go from a degree in culinary arts to a director in aerospace? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So,
I think also that like we only give kids the same 10 careers to choose from too when they're younger, right? Like it's like, well, you can be a doctor, lawyer, teacher, scientist, like we give them I know that they take that test where it kind of gives them possible, that test that they take. And I remember doing it, I think when I was in middle school.
I have a funny story about that test actually, but yeah.
What happened?
Oh, I remember taking that test you're talking about.
Oh, you do? Yeah.
I think it was like 7th grade or something when I took it. Anyways, yeah, I remember, and I didn't take it serious. Like I didn't know what it was for. I was just like, what is this stupid thing? And you had to go in and you had to pick like, what are 2 careers or whatever that you wanted to go into. And so I went down the list and I found like the dumbest things I could find, in my opinion, like at that age. So I think I marked like barber and bartender. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but I'm like, those were like 2 of like the weirdest things on the list. Like I want to be a barber and a bartender. And so I marked those on. And then I remember in my senior year, I went and met with my counselor to make sure I was still, online with graduating and everything. And they literally pulled out my folder and that thing was right on top, that stinking test. And I'm like, that stayed with me like my permanent record for like ever. And I was just blown away. Like, really? At seventh grade? Like, I mean, I was what, 12? They're all of a sudden like, what do you want to be? What are you going to go into? And it's just crazy. Like it blew me away that was still in my record. So
I have a funny story that I'd like to share, but literally only my family knows this. So this is going to be the first time.
Everybody who listens to the show.
So if you're listening, please don't share this out. Only my family knows this. So I took that test and I remember it being asking questions like, do you like this? Do you like that? I have, same as you, I was not taking it serious. I kind of was in a different place when I was younger because of my home situation.
Sure.
So I remember it vaguely. I know we took it during home ec. Everyone was excited to get their results back of what, options they would have. And mine was, okay, everyone listening, keep this a secret because no one knows this. I got back truck driver, and there's nothing wrong with truck drivers at all. But I really had a moment there like, wow, this is the only thing that came up for me as like a potential career. And I held on to that for a long time. Like, oh man, I know sometimes my language is foul. So I could see that maybe with truck drivers, but I didn't really see where the connect. I'm a terrible driver actually. So I don't know what the connection was at all. So my immediate family, we all know this, and they joke around with me because oftentimes when I go to math conferences, I just finished writing 2 books in a series. So I get all these people saying like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. This is, wow, I can't believe you did this. And this is so cool. And my family's always in the background, like, yeah, that's good for this truck driver over here, because they know what that test came back for, what it came back for and what that did to like my mindset. Yeah. When my son was older, he had like, I think they gave him more options as I don't know, they gave the test and he had some type of scientist for every single option that they gave him. So I'm like, oh, well, clearly, do you want to go into science? He's like, no, I want to write. So he writes, he's, doing this diplomacy thing. It goes to show you, like we were saying earlier with tests, it's such a small picture. And sometimes it doesn't even relate. Like it doesn't even show who the child is and who, who they are as a being. I mean, I personally don't see myself as a truck driver. I mean, I could maybe deep down have some of those character traits in there, but I got the tickets to show you I'm not a good driver. So, so no one share that story because that's private.
That's awesome. And it's really interesting because as a, moldable child, you get results like that from a test like that. And you're like, oh, is that what I'm destined to be? Is that what my path is? Like truck driver or barber or whatever, right? Like, and there's my daughter, my second daughter, she loves Studio C. I don't know if you know Studio C on YouTube. They're kind of this comedy, kind of like Saturday Night Live type. Anyways, they do all these funny skits and stuff, but they do one skit where they actually make fun of that test where these people are all taking a test and they're all like, getting like, oh, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor or different thing. And this one guy keeps getting like, I'm going to be a trash man. And it doesn't like matter like how he changes his test. They're doing it on like iPad, so like calculate.
And they gave him the same answer each time.
Yeah. So like every time he like changes his answers, he's like, "You're a trash man. You're a trash man. Anyways, but he's like getting upset. He's like, "How can I be a trash man?" Like, because that's really how it is. Like we identify with what those tests tell us.
Exactly. We make that as our identity. That's why I struggled with that test for so long because again, nothing knocking that industry at all. Right. I mean, it's completely needed, but as a kid, you're told, I think I was also upset that I only had an option. I didn't have all these other options like my friends, which I think was like another issue there too. So you're already feeling low, in school, you're not feeling well, your confidence is low. And then we do these things to kids that just could, either make them feel better or make them feel worse. And oftentimes it makes them feel worse. So now I laugh at everyone who knows that truck driver story. Like, that's great. I know math now. So
I'm so glad you shared that. That's wonderful. And so, God, there's so many. We could continue this conversation for like ever, I think. But there's so many things, and I don't love to bring like politics into my show, but I think there is some politics at play with the education system and what we were talking about with higher education and feeling like you have to go and get a degree and you have to build up all this debt to go to school. And it's almost like it's a broken system in many ways. And it's pretty disheartening from a parent standpoint who's looking at kids. I mean, my 5 daughters, I'm sitting there like, what is their path? Like, do they really have to go to school? And I tell them all the time, like, if you want to go to school, like go to school. I get it. Like I went to school and I felt it was important for me and I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. But I don't think that you necessarily have to go to school. And with you being an educator, I know you're kind of unconventional, but most people in your industry would say, no, school is like you have to get an education or you're going to fail or you're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever. And
I think we've proven that that's not the case, right? I mean, if you look at all these different careers that kind of stemmed out of nowhere, like we were talking about before, social media manager, we didn't know Instagram was going to exist and there would be a person to manage all that. So I don't think that old, that's an old mentality of if you don't go to college, you're going to end up in this, type of career. I think you can invent a career at this point. You can literally invent it. And I think, what you mentioned earlier, I say that saying all the time, the school system, the education system is broken. It is. It's not it might be, it's not, there's no gray here. It is broken. And I think that's why we have to work so hard to reform it. But I think it takes loud voices to do that, because you said it earlier in the show, like we have had the same education system for so long. All we're doing is adding more homework and more tests and more work. There's more teacher burnout, more stress. We need to pull back. We need to pull back and figure out like what at the core is our mission here. At the core, we want kids to be able to function in the society, whatever that society looks like. So how do we do that? And I think that's a question that schools need to address. But I also think it's a question for parents as well, because I think with parents, now I'm going to flip it and speak on the other end as a parent.
Yeah.
I think I'm very loud and vocal with my school district. They're sick of me, but I'm very loud and vocal because I know what to advocate for, because I can see it. But I think with parents, it's very difficult to know, what should I be fighting for? Is this okay? Like, I think it's okay as a parent to be like, my kid's spending 2 hours on homework. This doesn't feel right.
Right.
We're allowed to say that, but the way the hierarchy of how school parent relationships have always been is the school knows best and the parents just have to follow and support. When I really think that, it really should be a collaborative effort, right? Where we take in all the strengths that the parents have and all of their culture and everything that they're bringing to the table, and use that in our classrooms as well. I really would love to see the shift in the parent-teacher relationship, because and I think it depends on the cultural background too. I know for Latinx people, we just stay quiet and we do what the teacher says, because that's a form of respect. That's how we show respect for the elders, for the teachers. We don't question their authority.
Yep.
But I do think we need to question authority. And I think that's why I always say, like, it's that little rebel in me against education that, obviously I'm in it and I'm trying to make it better, but I think we make it better by speaking up and saying, hey, this is not okay. Hey, my kid cried because he got a 40 on a test. I don't think you have to, I don't think anything that, kids get upset. So, anytime your kid's upset, I'm sure you don't have to like go into the school and be like, my kid's upset. But if a kid gets a grade and is identifying themselves with that grade, I think that's a conversation to have with the teacher. I think it's a conversation to have with the teacher. Tell me what my child is doing right.
Yep.
Tell me the good things that you see within my child. And I think it's difficult for parents to get there because we've never seen that before. We've never seen a society where parents are like, hey, wait a second, hold on, I want to question this piece. We always comply. So I'm speaking to, on a parent end of it, I guess I'm telling everybody, parents, teachers, everyone alike, stop complying and just change this bad boy up. So.
No, I really like that because we have a 10-year-old. One of our daughters is 10, and yesterday she was off, like she was upset. And I'm like, what's going on? What's happening? Like she was fighting with her sisters, and she's usually like our little angel. She's very good. And she was fighting with the twins and just being a little pill. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? And I just pulled her aside and I'm like, what's the deal? Like, she's like, I don't know. I don't want to go to school. And she literally said that. And I said, why? Why don't you want to go to school? She started crying. And there was something they were learning that she just didn't understand. She didn't get it. And so she had this anxiety about going to school because she thought she was dumb. And kind of like what you were just saying about, like, if the kid gets a 40 on a test, like, we need to have that conversation if they're upset about it and stuff. And make sure they understand that, like, you're not... your destiny is not determined by that one score or that one thing. Exactly. Or that, right? Like, or that test where it says you're a truck driver, or like, you are not confined by that test, that result. Like, you can determine what you want in life and what you want to become. And if you put enough time, effort, and focus into it, like, you can do anything you put your mind to. And
exactly.
I think that's really like what we've got to get around, like, and this conventional, in the United States, we do have like a structured education system, and it doesn't, like we've been talking this whole episode, this whole time, is it doesn't have a focus of empowering the kids. It doesn't have a focus of focusing them on what to do to be successful. It's just like, you just got to learn this, memorize it, and then forget it. Like, that's
a factory system.
Yeah.
It's a factory system.
And if you look at other countries, like, other countries are doing so much better in education. Like, the United States is not the leader in education.
Oh, no.
I mean, we're far from it. I mean, like you say, we're just cranking them out like a factory. And when you go over to like Asia, like they put emphasis on, meditation
Yes.
and mindset and how to be focused and how to, they teach different things. And you
And
go over to Finland and they don't give homework. Like there's no homework in Finland. Like
yep.
there's all these countries that we could like model our education system after that are having great results, and yet we're just still just like, nope, we've been doing this for 200 years, we're going to keep doing it. And
Yeah, absolutely.
we
And
need
and
to
even going back to grades, I think it's Finland, actually. I want to say that they give feedback as opposed to grades.
yeah,
Hey, Adam, I noticed that for, 3 plus 4, you got this, you did this great with this visual. I'm wondering if you can try 3 plus 8, whatever, some type of feedback that you give to the student as opposed to a grade where I did something that's constructive for them. Oh, my teacher likes that I did this. So this is awesome. And then, my teacher wants me to work on this. That feels a little bit better than 35% or 75%, and I'm throwing that 75% in there because some kids feel like that's a failure, like that grade isn't great. So yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the education systems in other places, I don't think anybody has it figured out perfectly. So we don't have like really an ideal model to look after, but I do think that we need to humanize the education system in things like caring about the students as a whole. Everything we've been talking about today is really building up their self-esteem, caring about them as these little humans, because that's what they are. They're not numbers to us, and making them feel like they can tackle everything. There's a reason why all these kids love these superhero movies. It's because they want to feel that empowerment, that adventure, that I'm also a comic book nerd, so I'm throwing this in there because I think I feel this too. But who doesn't want to be one of those comic book characters, right? You go on you fight the bad guy, you go on an adventure, you like, those things are engaging and fun, and you want to be the hero in your own story. And our education should look that way, where we're making kids feel like the heroes, where they are the heroes. And we're not seeing that. And ways to humanize it, like you said, is to do things like mindfulness. Give them a break in school. Like, they get this short amount of time to just like talk to each other and collaborate with the other little humans around them. And then they got to get back to work. And then we send them home and we give them more work to do. Like, even that piece is not going well for us. But I think you're right, Adam. I think it's about like humanizing what education looks like for us.
yeah, I yeah, so true. And yeah, and we could carry on this topic for forever because there's just so many things about it. And I mean, we could get into, teachers aren't paid well enough in the United States.
Mhm.
If the United States dumped half as much money into education as they do in defense, like, we would have smaller classrooms. We would have higher paid teachers who really did care more about helping the student. And not to say that there's not teachers out there that do, but for some teachers, it's just, it's, they probably start out, most of them, as I want to help and change these students' lives. And then they get into it and they get stuck in the bureaucracy and they get stuck in the monotony, and they have to fight with not only the students, but the parents and the educationers, the others, the board of the school board and all this stuff. And eventually it's just, they get tired. They lose momentum. Right.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think there's every single teacher goes into it with the mindset of, I want to make the world a better place. I want to work with children. I want to make them feel this way in the ways that we all just, shared in this show. But just like I was saying, like, we dim the lights of our students, that passion that they come in with. We do the same thing with teachers through all these mandates. And that's where I feel that it's not really the teachers at fault. It's really the system is wrong. The system is broken. But I think that we can only change it through reform. Just as I was saying, parents often don't feel like they have a voice and can advocate for things. Teachers feel the same way. If I speak up, I'm going to get fired. I'll lose my tenure track. They're constantly living in fear, honestly, teacher. And there's a high rate of teachers leaving the profession now, and COVID just intensified that. They just increased that rate. So 100%, I totally agree with you. I think that they go into it trying their best and every day doing the best that they can, but they're working in something that doesn't work. The system that's around them isn't working for them, just like the system around our students isn't working for them either. It's almost like they're like in parallel places, our students and our teachers.
So yeah, 100% agree. And it's really sad. And it is really sad with the current pandemic that so many teachers, and my wife and I have talked about this, because there are times we get frustrated with the teachers. And then I step back and I'm like, you know what? They're doing the best they can. Like, they're trying to figure out how to do this online thing. And our kids actually go to school, but there's at any time, if they have too many COVID cases, they can shut the school down and it's all online. And so they're like, okay, are we doing in class this week? And then next week we could be doing online. Like, they've got to be flexible. And it's this horrible atmosphere right now. And honestly, and the kids there's no stability either. Like, there's no schedule, and it's hard to get in a rhythm when you're like, all this crazy stuff going on. And not only that, but teachers, elementary teachers specifically, have to fight with students about everything, right? Like, stop fighting, stop touching each other, stop picking your nose, stop, all this stuff. And now it's like you add in mask on top of that. Like, you have to put your mask on, keep your mask on, keep your mask on, put it over your nose, put it over your nose. Like, I mean, they just probably get tired. Like, they're broken.
Oh my goodness. Imagine telling a bunch of 5-year-olds that all day.
I know. Like, I mean, my kids hate wearing their mask over their nose and on their face in general. But like, I can't imagine a teacher having 25 students and having to keep them all on task with all the different things they have to keep track of. And, Sally, quit touching Johnny and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's just, it wears them down over time. Yeah. And, it is a broken system. And I think that through reform and through people like yourself and parents on my end who can speak up and say, hey, we need to change, we need to fix this, real change can happen over time. And so I'm so glad that you're doing that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. The goal is to get, to start a rally, right? Get people to feel that they can make a difference, and even children as well. Like, I really encourage students to advocate for themselves as well. Sure. We always see teachers and, any adults in our life as the authority, as, that is a societal norm, right? Yep. But I think that, we should also teach our kids to stick up for themselves. They stick up for themselves when it's a bully or someone that's their peer, right? But they can be able, I hope that they get enough courage to say, like, I had a lot of work last night, miss, whatever. And it was really hard for me. And, and then a conversation can start from there. So it doesn't always have to be parent to teacher, but students can really stick up for themselves and just kind of share how they feel about things too. But that I think is a longer road to go down. First, we have to kind of start with like setting those norms in adults, I think. So I'm hoping that my work will, get people rolling in this direction. I don't think the reform will be around the corner. I think it's going to take time, and I think it'll be a process, but I'm hoping that at least people see that there's a need for it. And then that way we can start moving towards that direction. So I appreciate you having me on here and letting me rant about all the things that are wrong in the ed system that I'd like to fix. So it's not every day that someone's like, yeah, come talk about that, because usually we're giving the other message on school's great and everything's great. But I like to shine a light on those spots that are dark and in the corner of the things that we have to kind of address. So I appreciate you giving me time to chat about that.
I appreciate it because, I think it is something that needs to be addressed. It's something that needs to be looked at. And, like I say, having 5 daughters, like it's been a struggle for us as parents. And I can't imagine any parent feeling at some level, and teachers as well. It's like I said, like we've talked about, it's the system itself that needs to be looked at. It's not specifically parents. I mean, there's always going to be the problem teachers. There's always going to be the problem students. There's always going to be the problem parents. But in a whole, if we can just focus on how do we make the system better and not just try to pile on like, okay, let's change how we do homework or whatever. Like, no, like we need real reform. And so, I'm grateful on my end for you sharing your message and being willing to come on my show and to share what you're doing. And, even though it's probably frowned upon in some of the academic world and arenas that you run in, it's so needed. And I'm glad that you're standing up and sending this message out there. So kudos to you. I really do appreciate it. It's needed.
Thank you. Hopefully I won't get too much flack for it, but you're right. Not everyone feels I should be sharing it, but I think that's why teachers like working with me, because we talk about the real stuff, like, okay, this doesn't work. How can we make this better? Instead of just kind of like, putting a Band-Aid over it and calling it a day. So
exactly.
Awesome. I appreciate you letting me be in my real form here. So
I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing it. Really, like that's amazing. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And we need so many more people like that to really make headway on this problem in our education system. So anything I can do to help bring any light to that I'm all for it. So it's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I want to just kind of start wrapping things up because I have taken so much of your time, but it's been such an amazing conversation, and I really have enjoyed it. I can't believe we're over an hour already, but
oh my God.
Because I think we could talk so much more about this stuff. Maybe we need to do a follow-up, episode later. But so where can people who want to know more about what you do, what your concepts, your perspective, or just reach out to you and say, hey, I really liked what I hear. What can I do to get you to, maybe there's educators that are also listening to this and want to have you come and speak to them. Where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Anybody can get a hold of me through my website, zendmath.com. So I offer a couple things that I just want to make teachers aware of. There's a membership that I have where I actually break down pretty much a lot of the things that we talked about, but what it can look like in their classroom. So all the things we were talking about math, like how can we actually make math enjoyable and relatable and culturally relevant and respect people's identities? How do we do that? I give them the solution for that in my membership. So I provide videos in there, and then we have one-on-one coaching where I actually help them carry it through. Another issue that we didn't talk about, and I'll keep this quick, in education is that we throw teachers into like a webinar and then say, okay, learn this, and okay, now you're good to go. But we don't give them the support to like back it up as they're implementing. So my membership offers that. For parents who are just interested in like how this math can look differently, how education can look differently, I would just recommend following me on my social media channels on Facebook, Instagram. If you go to Zend Math there, I post all the time. Today I did a division post on something that's like, no, stop doing this, please. So you can definitely, and it's not just math. I know my business is called Zen Math, but as you know, I mean, we talked about everything and anything today. It really is me trying to change the education system. So you'll find on social media that I really talk about all the things. So yeah, for parents, I would recommend going on my social media channels, and for teachers, if they go to zenmath.com, they can find out more about my teacher membership there.
Perfect. That's amazing. And for those listening and want to click on those, I will have those links underneath this episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening to it on the podcast. You can go and reach out to Rosalba. Rosalba. I will get that right, I promise.
You got it.
And you can reach out to her and connect with her, or go check out the resources that she has available to really help start a movement and create some momentum behind this reform that needs to happen in our education system. I feel strongly about it, and my wife and I will probably sit down and go check out some of those resources ourselves, because we still have young kids. I mean, our youngest are still 7, so we still have a long road ahead of us through the education system. But yeah, thank you so much. I truly appreciate your insights, and just the conversation in general has been so great. And thank you. I really do appreciate it. So before we kind of wrap up, though, I do like to always kind of say or ask this last question, and we can tweak it a little bit. But if you were to say that there's one or two to maybe three things that someone needs to do to unleash the greatness within themselves, or let's say unleash the greatness within their student, what would that be?
Ooh, okay. So one would be affirmations. I know that's probably a little bit out there, but I strongly believe in affirmations. I think it's what gets us through the day. I don't think we utilize them enough. I think that it's okay to use affirmations and build your confidence, and to say all the things that deep down you are. I am a smart person. I am capable of doing this. I am a good friend. I am a kind soul. I think that if we wake up and truly use affirmations and have our kids use them as well, so they're starting that habit early on, I think we would really believe in ourselves and have that confidence. Confidence gets a bad rep. If you're overconfident, people think you're cocky. I don't believe in that. Be confident. Own it. Own it.
Well, there's
So
a
I,
difference between confident and being a jerk, right?
yeah, well, yeah. You don't want to be a jerk, but you can say like you're awesome at things, and that's okay too. So I think affirmations is one way or one habit I think we can build in order to kind of unleash that. Um, and I think the other one I would say is that there's something that I heard in a classroom that a teacher said to a student, and it like hit my soul really hard. And I actually have it like written down on my desk so I can keep it in mind. So this teacher told this student one day, no one is you, and that is your power. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is so simple, but so deep, because we're in this world where we're comparing ourselves to one another and always worried about what people think of ourselves. And if we just went into it with, again, that confidence and being comfortable in your own skin, I know that there are other people probably saying the same thing I'm saying in math education, maybe. But no one's saying it like Rosalba. No one's saying it quite like me. So like you have to be able to embrace how amazing you are and not hold back because you feel that that's what you should do because that's how society deems it, right? So I think like owning that you are unique and that's okay, and live in that and relish in that and embrace that. And then that's contagious. So kids will pick that up if we do that ourselves.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And, of all the people I have interviewed so far, you were the first one to bring up affirmations. And that kind of surprises me because they really are a powerful tool. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And just to tell yourself those things. I am powerful. I am smart. I am kind. I am, and then having that that mindset that you are a hero and that it's okay to be an individual and to be you, and
Yeah.
you don't need to conform to what everybody thinks you need to be. Like, it's okay. I told you a little bit earlier about my 7-year-old daughter who they want to do the test on, and we had to sign a paper saying it was okay to run the test, and we marked no, we don't want her to take the test because we don't want her to have that stigma of, oh, I have to go take these special tests. We really do feel that she will be her, and she will succeed in whatever she decides to put her mind into. And I do know that there's a place for that, that those tests, that there are kids that probably do need to be diagnosed with certain things. But I, I think,
I think you need to have faith as a parent. Don't let what you feel should be the right thing to
right,
do as far as a school system determine your decision. You're the parent, so you know what your child is capable of. And she's young. So maybe right now, if she's struggling in an area, let's say that the teacher's saying, the question might be, okay, well, what support can we provide her then if this is the area that she's struggling in, and again, saying, I want to also hear my child's strengths doesn't necessarily mean it has to go straight to a test, but like, what can we do around this if you're seeing something? But I think, going back to the affirmations, when we do those things like the testing and all that stuff, that's when we start getting all those negative mindsets. We determine our identity very young. So if we were to use all those affirmations early on, I think that we would really breed like a society that truly believes in themselves and doesn't have all this doubt and fear, and people that are not willing to take the leap in something because they hold themselves back. We hold ourselves back, and we hold ourselves back because of what society has like conditioned us to do. So if we kind of just break that and start affirm all over the place, do it in the supermarket, when you're getting dressed, all the time, everywhere. You might sound crazy, it's okay. But if we do that, then we actually start believing in it. If I took everything I've been told when I was a kid, based off my life, based on my background, the group home, the foster home, if I truly let all those words identify me, I would not be here right now. Yeah. And I'm here because instead I chose to believe I'm smart, I am kind, and I can do this. So I think the words we say to others matter, but the words that we say to ourselves have a very deep impact.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And your story is amazing. We got so wrapped up in our discussion about education and stuff that we just skimmed over your story, but it really is amazing that you went from where you were in the foster care system to being this amazing educator and woman, mother, wife, and just out there promoting reform in the education. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for sharing your insights and your story. And just keep going forward and pushing on. So you're doing a great work. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And I talked a lot, so thank you.
That was good. And for those who are listening, please go check out the resources that Rosalba can provide, and connect with her if you have any questions or concerns. And she has a lot to offer in this area of education reform. So please reach out to her, connect with her, go check out her resources. And for those of you who are listening, go out there and live your life fully. Go and unleash your greatness today, and have an amazing, fantastic day. And we'll see you in future episodes.